The police violently kicked open my bedroom door at exactly 1:47 in the morning with blinding flashlights. My name is Penelope, and I am 32 years old, standing perfectly still in a shattered room while two officers rushed forward. They held up an arrest warrant while aggressively overturning my furniture to secure the immediate area. One officer grabbed my shoulder roughly before reading the official charges aloud to the entire house. "You are under arrest for estate fraud," he shouted loudly over the lingering echo of breaking wood. I looked past his dark uniform out into the hallway to see my parents standing there with their arms crossed tightly. A wide smile of pure satisfaction spread across both of their faces as they eagerly watched my orchestrated downfall unfold. Standing right next to them was my younger sister holding her smartphone up high to capture every single humiliating angle for the internet. She was broadcasting a live video of my arrest while gleefully reading aloud the hateful comments from over 1 million active viewers. I kept my facial expression completely blank because panic is always the absolute worst enemy of survival in any crisis. I stepped forward voluntarily, holding out both of my hands to let the cold metal handcuffs lock securely around my bare wrists. I did not resist or argue with the officers because I already knew exactly how this elaborate trap would ultimately backfire on them. Welcome to revenge mode, where the darkest family secrets are finally dragged into the unforgiving light. Hit that like button and share this video with anyone who has ever been betrayed by their own blood. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to the channel to find out exactly how I sent the real criminals straight to federal prison. The relentless flashing lights from the smartphone gradually faded behind the cold metal door of the patrol car. My mind immediately drifted back to a specific afternoon exactly 3 months before this chaotic midnight arrest. I had driven across Kansas City to attend the official reading of my late grandfather's testament at a prestigious downtown law firm. Walking into that pristine conference room felt suffocating because I was forced to sit at the same mahogany table as Mom-Dad along with Fiona. We had never been a close family unit by any stretch of the imagination, but the palpable tension radiating from their side of the room was completely unprecedented. They sat with remarkably stiff postures, while glaring in my direction with profound entitlement, mixed with poorly concealed resentment. The heavy silence in the room felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders before the lawyer even spoke. Our family attorney Marcus cleared his throat loudly before meticulously breaking the heavy wax seal on the final document. He adjusted his glasses while reading through the standard legal jargon regarding the distribution of minor physical assets before finally reaching the primary financial estate. His voice remained monotonously professional as he explicitly confirmed that the entire $5 million trust fund had been left under my sole ownership. However, he deliberately paused right after making that massive declaration to take a slow sip of water. Marcus then read a highly ambiguous clause regarding the immediate transfer of administrative authority in the unlikely event of my sudden legal incapacitation. He practically leaned over the table while emphasizing those specific legal loopholes with a very calculated intonation to ensure my family heard every single syllable. Fiona instantly turned her head to exchange a deeply meaningful look with Mom, followed by a sharp nod toward Dad right across the polished table. That silent communication carried a sinister weight that instantly triggered every investigative instinct I had developed over my professional career. Mom clenched her manicured hands into tight fists before leaning forward with absolute fury burning in her cold eyes. "That girl absolutely does not deserve that money. We have to do something," she growled loudly while completely ignoring the professional setting of the legal office. Dad simply nodded his head in firm agreement while tapping his fingers rhythmically against the wooden surface. I remained perfectly still in my leather chair while carefully analyzing their incredibly strange behavioral patterns. None of them contested the will through normal legal channels or demanded further clarification from the attorney about the wealth distribution process. Instead, they shared those subtle nods while Marcus purposely avoided making any direct eye contact with me during the remainder of the tense meeting. I could physically feel the heavy foundation of a malicious fraud conspiracy being rapidly constructed right behind my back. They were clearly plotting to trigger that exact administrative vulnerability Marcus had so conveniently highlighted just moments prior. It became blatantly obvious that the lawyer was already working closely with them. Challenging them right there in that enclosed conference room would have been a massive tactical error on my part. I needed concrete evidence rather than emotional arguments, so I decided to abruptly stand up from my chair while calmly gathering my personal belongings. I walked straight toward the heavy glass doors of that law office without uttering a single word of protest or giving them any indication that I suspected their dark intentions. Preserving the element of surprise was absolutely critical to ensure I did not accidentally alert them before I could fully understand the true depth of their impending betrayal. Walking away in total silence was my very first step in building an impenetrable case against them. Exactly 4 weeks after that incredibly tense will, reading an urgent security alert email from the banking system arrived directly on my phone. Shortly after that notification appeared on my screen, my device vibrated continuously with an incoming call from a senior account manager. Ms. Penelope, we detected multiple failed login attempts from an unknown network address. The representative informed me with obvious professional concern. I sat completely still at my desk while mentally tracing those digital footsteps straight back to Marcus and his downtown law office. Leave the account operating normally. I already know who is doing this, and I will handle it myself. I replied calmly before disconnecting the call. This blatant attempt to penetrate my financial defenses confirmed my absolute worst suspicions about their ongoing criminal conspiracy. That digital intrusion was certainly not the only red flag waving wildly in my direction during those highly stressful weeks. I constantly experienced a persistent sensation of being closely watched by unseen individuals every single time I stepped outside my front door to run basic errands. It felt as though someone was meticulously tracking my daily schedule to figure out exactly when my house would be completely empty. I decided to take proactive measures by purchasing specialized high-definition surveillance equipment and spending an entire weekend installing hidden cameras discreetly around my living room. I positioned the tiny lenses perfectly to cover the main entryway, along with my home workspace, without leaving any visible traces of the complex installation. My newly established security network did not have to wait very long before capturing the exact evidence I needed to validate my growing paranoia. A few days later, my mobile device pinged with a silent motion detection alert while I was sitting alone in a crowded local diner eating my lunch. I quickly opened the live video feed to see Fiona quietly unlocking my front door, using a spare key she must have stolen from my bag several months ago. She crept into my living room with calculated precision before immediately targeting the locked drawers of my heavy wooden desk where I kept my important files. The hidden camera clearly recorded her rummaging aggressively through my private personal papers while taking multiple photographs of highly sensitive legal documents using her smartphone. Watching my own sister blatantly violate my personal sanctuary was a deeply infuriating experience that tested every single ounce of my professional discipline. Any normal civilian would have immediately called the local police department to report the crime, or immediately changed their locks to prevent another illegal entry. I could have easily submitted that crystal-clear video footage directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where I worked to have her arrested for breaking and entering. However, doing so prematurely would have only caught a relatively low-level pawn while allowing the real masterminds to completely escape facing any true legal justice. I needed to build a flawless federal case that would simultaneously trap everyone involved in this elaborate extortion scheme without giving them any chance to mount a legal defense. I meticulously extracted the encrypted video files from the external cloud server and transferred them securely into my heavily protected digital evidence vault. I deliberately chose to maintain my complete silence while returning to my house later that evening, pretending absolutely nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I purposely left the desk drawers exactly as she had hastily rearranged them to give her the ultimate false confidence that her covert mission was entirely successful. Letting them truly believe they were successfully outsmarting me was the only viable strategy to safely lure out the bigger fish pulling the strings from the shadows. I was patiently weaving an inescapable digital web that would eventually ensnare Mom, Dad, Fiona, along with their corrupt legal counsel in one decisive retaliatory strike. Exactly 72 hours before that fateful night of my arrest, I began implementing the final steps of my counterattack. The impending situation was absolutely not the brilliant trap my treacherous family mistakenly believed they had cleverly set for my downfall. It was actually a highly calculated snare I had meticulously designed to force them into taking direct action and committing a clearly documented federal crime. They needed a distinct push to finally cross the legal line from quietly plotting a theoretical financial conspiracy into officially executing an illegal extortion scheme. I decided to proactively expose a massive vulnerability by deliberately manufacturing an entire folder containing highly compelling but completely fabricated financial transaction records. I printed those heavily manipulated pages displaying enormous offshore bank transfers before leaving the thick envelope sitting conspicuously right on the center of my home office desk. I knew Fiona was still monitoring my daily movements closely, so leaving those papers out in the open guaranteed she would eagerly steal them. Olivia arrived at my property later that afternoon, driving a large rental moving truck to safely execute the next crucial phase of our protective operation. We put on a very convincing public performance by pretending to load several heavy pieces of old wooden furniture into the back of the spacious vehicle for the benefit of any spying neighbors. In reality, she was covertly transporting all of my authentic legal documents, along with the original trust fund certificates, to a highly secure location completely outside the local jurisdiction. Olivia lifted a heavily taped carton box filled with my genuine files before pausing to look at me with profound concern evident in her posture. "Are you absolutely sure you want to let them submit this fake report to the local police?" she asked quietly, while adjusting her tight grip on the heavy cardboard container. I took a slow sip of my dark coffee before meeting her worried gaze with unwavering confidence. "That is exactly what I need them to do to shut this trap on themselves," I replied smoothly while helping her slide the box into the truck. Once Olivia drove safely away from my neighborhood, I returned inside the house to finalize my mental preparations for the incoming legal storm. I knew with absolute professional certainty that Marcus would aggressively utilize those planted decoy documents to immediately formalize their fraudulent criminal accusations against me. He would eagerly instruct Mom and Dad to officially submit that forged evidence to the local authorities to initiate a devastating legal strike under the false guise of protecting the family estate. Filing a completely fabricated police report using deliberately manufactured financial evidence instantly elevated their pathetic greed into a severe federal offense, carrying massive mandatory prison sentences. The trap was finally fully set in motion, and all I had to do was wait for them to arrogantly pull the trigger. I methodically brewed a fresh pot of strong black coffee while purposefully turning off every single light inside my quiet house to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. I sat patiently in the absolute darkness of my living room, staring blankly at the locked front door while anticipating the inevitable loud arrival of local law enforcement. I fully understood that an official arrest warrant was already making its rapid way through the local judicial system, based entirely on their malicious perjury and forged documentation. I actively welcomed the incoming police raid because their aggressive intervention would permanently lock in the criminal guilt of every single person involved in this treacherous conspiracy. Allowing them to temporarily strip away my physical freedom was the ultimate tactical price I was perfectly willing to pay. The time around 2:15 in the morning at the criminal intake area was always flooded with the smell of harsh chemicals and hurried footsteps. I was firmly escorted to the main processing counter by the arresting officers who had aggressively removed me from my private residence. They loudly instructed me to empty my pockets completely before aggressively ordering me to place all of my personal belongings neatly onto a cold metal tray resting on the counter. I silently deposited my leather wallet along with my house keys without making any sudden movements that might provoke an unnecessary physical altercation. The entire booking procedure was systematically designed to strip away individual dignity, but I remained perfectly composed while waiting patiently before the elevated booking desk. The duty officer sitting behind the thick security glass looked incredibly exhausted, while rubbing his tired eyes under the glaring ceiling lights. He sluggishly grabbed my newly created case file before beginning to type my full legal name, along with my personal social security number, into the centralized database to properly finalize the official arrest record. He was clearly expecting this to be just another highly routine booking procedure involving a standard civilian suspect caught committing fraud in the middle of the night. He casually hit the enter button to submit my personal data into the local law enforcement network, while letting out a deep sigh of profound physical fatigue. That mundane atmosphere completely shattered the exact second his computer screen suddenly flashed a blindingly bright red color directly across his unamused face. A massive warning banner instantly materialized, blocking every single application, while prominently displaying a bold message indicating a federal protected identity with severely restricted access. The localized police software completely froze as the automated security protocols initiated an immediate lockdown of his terminal to prevent any unauthorized local viewing of my classified operational background. The encrypted system was actively rejecting their local jurisdiction, while simultaneously sending an automated alert to my federal agency regarding my compromised status. The exhausted duty officer instantly turned extremely pale as his tired eyes widened in absolute shock at the glaring crimson monitor illuminating his features. He pushed his heavy office chair back violently, making a loud scraping noise against the tiled floor while staring at me with genuine apprehension. He immediately realized that processing my specific criminal file had completely exceeded the legal jurisdiction of his local police department in Kansas City. Arresting an active federal forensic auditor carrying a top-tier security clearance was a catastrophic jurisdictional error that required immediate intervention from the highest available authority. He frantically reached out with trembling fingers to grab the heavy desk phone so he could call his commanding officer directly to report the massive anomaly. He slammed the receiver against his ear while urgently pressing the keypad to bypass the normal dispatch channels. System access error. What the hell is a federal protected identity? The duty officer asked, while staring directly at the frozen monitor with pure panic in his voice. Stop all data entry operations immediately. I am coming down to the scene right now. The voice of the police chief echoed loudly through the speakerphone function. Hearing that absolute command clearly terrified the surrounding personnel, who had been casually watching the routine intake procedure unfold just moments prior. The panicked duty officer gave a frantic hand signal to his uniformed colleague standing near the holding cells. That second officer cautiously approached my position with noticeable hesitation before quickly using his universal key to unlock the heavy metal handcuffs from my aching wrists. They officially treated me like a highly dangerous anomaly while respectfully inviting me to step away from the common processing area. Exactly 15 minutes after I was escorted inside the interrogation room, the heavy wooden door burst open from an incredibly violent push. The local police chief stormed inside the confined space while breathing heavily from his rapid sprint down the long corridor. He stared at me with profound suspicion clearly radiating from his hardened facial features while trying to comprehend the bizarre situation currently unfolding within his department. He firmly ordered the other remaining officers to exit the immediate area before locking the solid door securely behind him to ensure absolute privacy during our conversation. The seasoned commander simply could not understand how a seemingly ordinary civilian accountant accused of a domestic financial dispute possessed a highly restricted government profile. He aggressively demanded physical proof of my true identity, while refusing to accept the automated system warnings blinking on his computer at face value. I calmly reached into my concealed jacket pocket to retrieve my solid credentials before sliding the leather case smoothly across the cold metal table separating us. He snatched the item quickly to meticulously inspect the intricate federal seals embedded deeply within the official identification card. He then utilized his highly secure mobile device to call a classified verification hotline to cross-reference my operational credential number directly with the Federal Bureau of Investigation database. The tense silence stretching across the small room felt overwhelmingly heavy while he waited patiently for the centralized operator to confirm my active employment status. The digital confirmation finally came through the encrypted communication line, proving beyond any reasonable doubt that I was indeed a senior forensic auditor holding supreme operational authority. His highly aggressive posture instantly dissolved into genuine professional respect as he slowly lowered his communication device back to his duty belt. The commanding officer officially realized he was standing right in the middle of a massive federal sting operation rather than a simple family inheritance squabble. He carefully placed my credentials back onto the table while offering his complete law enforcement cooperation without asking any further unnecessary questions about my covert activities. The chief frowned deeply while looking down at the scattered local paperwork resting on the metallic surface. Your file is completely locked at the highest possible level. Who exactly are you really working for? The chief asked with undeniable curiosity coloring his gruff voice. I placed my hand firmly over the metallic badge while making direct eye contact with the weary commander. I have been building this specific case for months, and from this exact moment forward, the FBI will be taking over everything, I stated with absolute clarity. I officially informed him that the local jurisdiction over this complex estate fraud investigation was now permanently transferred to a specialized federal task force awaiting my command. The local police department would no longer have any active role in prosecuting the individual suspects involved in this malicious extortion scheme. I then unzipped a hidden compartment inside my clothing to produce a highly encrypted external hard drive containing the ultimate culmination of my grueling undercover work. I pushed the small black device across the table, explaining that it held every single piece of undeniable evidence required to completely dismantle their criminal network. The digital storage unit contained all the illegal financial transaction records proving Marcus accepted massive bribes directly from Dad to fundamentally alter the legal trust documents. It also held the crystal-clear video surveillance footage showing Fiona illegally breaking into my personal residence to plant the fabricated evidence used to initiate my false arrest. Supplying this comprehensive evidence package guaranteed that my treacherous family members would definitely face severe federal prison sentences without any possibility of securing a lenient plea deal. The dawn had not yet broken when 5 black unmarked sport utility vehicles completely surrounded the entire perimeter of the suburban house. Inside the brightly lit living room, Fiona was aggressively broadcasting a highly anticipated second live stream to celebrate their seemingly flawless legal victory. She was eagerly parading around the expensive furniture while continuously hurling vicious insults regarding my character to an actively engaged audience of over 1 million viewers. Mom and Dad sat comfortably on the leather sofa drinking champagne while fully endorsing the malicious digital campaign being waged against my professional reputation. They were all completely intoxicated by the temporary illusion of success, without realizing a massive federal sting operation was actively closing in on their exact location. That pathetic fraud is finally going to pay the ultimate price for her disgusting greed. Fiona laughed loudly right into the camera lens of her smartphone. Her arrogant digital celebration was violently interrupted when a heavily armed federal tactical unit utilized specialized breaching equipment to completely obliterate the reinforced front door. The deafening sound of shattering wood echoed loudly through the quiet suburban neighborhood as dozens of highly trained agents flooded into the shattered entryway. They moved with absolute tactical precision, wearing thick protective gear while aggressively securing every single exit point to prevent anyone from escaping the premises. FBI, everybody drop your hands immediately and step back right now. A federal tactical agent shouted commandingly, while pointing his weapon directly into the center of the room. One of the tactical operators aggressively snatched the mobile device directly out of her trembling hands before abruptly terminating the active broadcasting signal. Millions of internet spectators witnessed the chaotic tactical raid unfold in real time before their glowing screens suddenly faded to absolute black. The rapidly scrolling comment section instantly shifted from viciously mocking my sudden imprisonment to expressing pure, unadulterated terror as they realized the FBI was actively dismantling the entire household. The overwhelming public humiliation she had desperately tried to inflict upon me was instantaneously reversed onto her own shoulders on a massive national platform. She stood there completely paralyzed by fear while watching her entire digital empire crumble into dust in a matter of seconds. Mom and Dad were forcefully pushed flat against their expensive living room walls, while heavy steel handcuffs were aggressively ratcheted shut behind their trembling backs. Their faces rapidly transitioned from absolute malicious triumph into profound pale shock as they were physically dragged out of their own residence in front of all their curious neighbors. The flashing red lights from the federal vehicles illuminated their complete public disgrace, while they were unceremoniously shoved into the back of heavily armored transport vans. They had arrogantly assumed their fabricated evidence would easily destroy my life, but instead, it had triggered an inescapable federal avalanche right onto their own heads. The quiet suburban street was completely transformed into a massive federal crime scene, drawing the attention of every single resident. While that intense residential raid was simultaneously unfolding across town, a secondary tactical team executed a perfectly synchronized strike against the prestigious downtown law firm. Federal investigators stormed into the opulent corporate lobby to publicly arrest Marcus right at his polished mahogany desk before he could even attempt to shred any incriminating paperwork. They methodically confiscated all of his physical client files, along with his encrypted computer servers, to completely preserve the massive trail of illegal financial transactions. I stood perfectly still inside the quiet police station while watching multiple surveillance monitors stream the successful culmination of my exhaustive undercover operation. I confidently signed the finalized legal authorization papers, knowing my treacherous family was finally heading straight toward federal prison. 14 months had passed since that chaotic morning of the coordinated tactical raid, and the federal trial finally reached its definitive closing procedures. The lead federal prosecutor stood confidently before the judicial podium to loudly read every single piece of forged documentary evidence into the permanent public record. He methodically projected the crystal-clear surveillance video showing the illegal break-in, which made it absolutely impossible for the cornered defendants to deny their malicious criminal actions. The massive mountain of undeniable digital proof completely suffocated any pathetic attempts by their defense attorneys to secure a lenient plea agreement. The presiding federal judge firmly struck his wooden gavel to deliver the final legal consequences without showing even a shred of judicial mercy. He decisively sentenced Marcus to 12 years in federal prison, while permanently revoking his legal license to practice law anywhere within the entire country. Dad and Mom both received harsh 8-year prison sentences, along with a strict judicial order completely confiscating all of their personal assets for mandatory systemic restitution. Fiona was officially sentenced to 5 years of severe incarceration while receiving an unprecedented strict probation mandate, permanently banning her from utilizing any social media platforms forever. Mom gripped the wooden railing of the defendant's stand tightly while openly sobbing in front of the entirely packed federal courtroom gallery. "Penelope, please forgive me. I truly realize I was wrong," she cried out desperately while begging for any lingering trace of familial mercy. I simply looked back at her pathetic emotional display with a completely empty gaze devoid of any lingering attachment or basic human sympathy. I turned my back decisively on the entire treacherous group and walked straight out of those heavy wooden courtroom doors without ever looking back. I stepped outside to warmly embrace the brilliant morning sunlight shining down on the concrete steps as a powerful symbol of my ultimate rebirth. I was finally completely free from their toxic manipulation and ready to build an independent future based entirely on my own unshakable integrity. The Revenge Mode production team officially presents this dramatic narrative strictly for educational purposes regarding the critical importance of personal boundaries. We aim to powerfully illustrate how victims can successfully handle severe family crises utilizing cold logic combined with the absolute power of the legal system. Penelope demonstrated extraordinary psychological resilience by ruthlessly protecting her fundamental human rights and decisively executing a complete permanent cutoff from her highly toxic relatives. The treacherous villains ultimately suffered the devastating but entirely inevitable legal consequences directly resulting from their own malicious greed and incredibly arrogant criminal decisions inside the courtroom. The core lessons extracted directly from this intense legal battle provide invaluable guidance for protecting your fundamental personal boundaries. The most devastating betrayals frequently wear the familiar faces of those sharing our own biological bloodline. You must immediately recognize that familial obligation never justifies enduring persistent emotional abuse or coordinated financial exploitation. Establishing an impenetrable personal boundary is the absolute ultimate defense mechanism required to permanently protect your own self-respect. Walking away completely from toxic manipulation is a powerful demonstration of unyielding personal strength rather than a sign of emotional weakness. The formidable power of the legal system remains the most effective weapon against arrogant predators who mistakenly believe they operate above the law. Utilizing verifiable facts over raw emotion guarantees that undeniable truth will ultimately prevail against elaborate criminal conspiracies. The entire production team sincerely thanks our dedicated audience for patiently listening to this intense narrative until the very final moment, while we deeply appreciate your continuous support. How would you handle the devastating situation if you discovered your own family was actively framing you for a severe crime? Please share your honest thoughts regarding this outcome down in the comments section below, and remember to subscribe.